Simcha, celebration, Simcha, Simcha, the celebration of life.
Hi from me, Jared Epstein, and welcome to another episode of Simcha, a celebration of life. Jewish artist Ari Hersch is making a name on the Johannesburg art scene and in other parts of the globe. He recently exhibited his work at the DeVille Bailey Gallery at Victoria Yard in Joburg. Simcha attended and found out more about this dynamic young artist.
Being Jewish has inspired my work. I was introduced by a Jewish artist by the name of Mark Chagall. He's world famous, he's one of the best ever. And his art was very Jewish, and he captured a lot of shtetl scenes. You know, I can almost relate that to the township scenes of the local South African artists. I come from a traditional Jewish family, and I have obviously the typical Jewish parents. And the moment that I decided to do art as a profession, it's amazing, they still support me. And today they're my biggest fans, and even the Jewish community has been amazing. And the minute they heard that I'm doing art, they're so supportive, and I think it's amazing. I am proud to be part of something a lot bigger than myself. You know, after learning about South African artists, South African greats, one being William Kentridge, I mean, if not being the greatest South African artist of this generation, and for me being alive, William Kentridge is definitely up there. I'm currently showing art in Tel Aviv, and I'm in talks with a gallery in Dubai, funny enough, and a couple galleries in Europe, and hopefully kind of seal up something in the United States. My most recent show was called Convivial. The word convivial means being happy and joyous. And that's exactly what I wanted to bring out in the viewer, you know, or the person buying the work. It's important that they get that good feeling, you know, looking at it. And I thought, you know, using a subject matter and keeping the same, let's say, a feeling throughout, I went with the use of kids from different demographics. So they came from different homes, different backgrounds, rich, poor, and you know, in the end of the day, we're all human and we all have the same feelings. At the opening, the public opening, I overheard a kid look at my work and he says to me, you know, these are just squiggles, I can do that. And I was like, you know, maybe you could, because my technique is very loose, it's very free, and you know, I don't like to be constrained to, you know, I like my work to look real, but when you look at it closely, it must be very, it's wild. When I was a kid, I was heavily inspired by South African black artists. That's why originally a lot of my original subject matter was actually African faces or township scenes, even though I hadn't grown up in that environment. Because I was so inspired about these artists like Gerald Sokoto, George Pemba, Ben Makala, I'm still heavily influenced, and their style still influences my work today. This was actually the piece that little child commented and said, you know, I can do it, the squiggles. And you know, you see, after looking at it, it is a lot of squiggles, but it does make up a bigger picture, you know, it's very loose, it's free. I like to express myself on the canvas and have fun, you know. And this particular style, if you make an error, you're able to incorporate that into the work. So this is one of my painted works. It's still a medium that I'm really learning, and I'm trying to embrace it. And the way that I paint is actually the way that I sketch. So you can actually see in the work, you'll see the squiggles, the paintbrush strokes. It's very much the same way that I use the charcoal in the work. I try not to make all my works look identical. I want to try to bring out something unique in every piece. So this particular work, I went with a very flat pink background to kind of bring out the actual person that I'm capturing. A lot of the time, the brush strokes go into the background. There's some paint drops that are kind of like still leaky that I don't take those away because I think they actually add to the piece, you know? And it's just something that happens. I don't look at it as like, oh no, it's an error. I mean, you can see some of the water drops that have come down the shirt here. But every little bit adds. I'm inspired by the human emotion. When I sketch someone, I always try and capture a feeling that will last forever, you know? And I want people to look at my work and almost get that same feeling. You'll see a lot of my pieces are happy and they feel good. And I think, you know, in this day and age, there's so much negativity around us that it's important to try and bring out some positive messages. And if I can make someone feel, even if it's for a second, happy looking at my work, then I've achieved what I wanted.
The executive director of the USC Shoah Foundation, Dr. Stephen Smith, played a key role in the birth of the Cape Town Holocaust Center, which is what it was called in 1999. And now, 20 years later, he returned to the Cape to look back at what has been achieved and to demonstrate the future of keeping the Holocaust story alive by using holographic technology.
It now gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce our patron and great friend, Dr. Stephen Smith.
I'm going to talk to you today about something called dimensions in testimony. It's a question that we've had about, so how do we continue the conversation with Holocaust survivors in the years that lie ahead? And how do we continue to engage more deeply with the stories that they have to share with us? We're living in a time of where we're seeing a rise in anti-Semitism and hatred of many kinds, actually. You know, for those of us that are trying to battle against that, sometimes it feels an uphill struggle. But one thing we know for certain is if we do not document the past and if we do not continue to tell our children and provide that warning, then this can get ahead of us in a way that we cannot even imagine. Holocaust survivors bring several things to us. First of all, they bring us close to the history. But nothing beats sitting, talking to someone who says, this is my story, this happened to me, and this is what it means. We realized, in spite of the fact that Holocaust survivors were telling their story every day in museums and universities and classrooms, that the time would come when there wouldn't be that interaction between living survivors and students in the classroom. So we wanted to say, is there a way to capture that interaction? And we thought about filming them in classrooms. Maybe we could actually film the interaction in the classroom itself. But that seemed like you were just filming a situation. What happens if we would ask them thousands of questions about their lives that kids normally ask and capture all that in a database so that you can then converse with that database? And so we came up with a project called Dimensions in Testimony. Very simple. We want to take an 85-year-old into a studio that looks like this, with 6,000 LED lights and 116 cameras around it, and stick them in the middle, about 12 feet away from the interviewer, and then ask them about 1,000 questions. This technology didn't exist at the point at which we wanted to interview the Holocaust survivors, and so we had to go about creating that. So at the University of Southern California, we put a team together of technologists and scientists with the Shoah Foundation team to say, how can we bring together both the science and the content and the education components so that we can create something that's truly educational from the technology? Obviously, we had to ask the question, is that a good idea? Is it a good idea to put somebody through that for so many hours? I mean, just forget that we're talking about the Holocaust and the worst moments of their lives. Just physically, to ask an 85-year-old to spend 20 hours answering questions about their life, even if they've been a baseball player, is a lot. Never mind if they've been to hell and back. And then asking them to relive every moment of that. And so we sat for 5 days, and it made us good and answered question after question after question after question. And today, it means that we can continue to talk with him. Do you believe in God?
You know, it's very difficult to answer this question about belief in God. I think that the essence, your essence, as being were brought up in my environment, was an inherent belief in the Almighty. How, what, and when, you didn't question. And I still don't question. So as far as I'm concerned, I have a very deep belief in the Almighty. I don't speculate on what he is, how he is, what he looks like, whether he looks like at all. As far as I'm concerned, I always remember the first words of Genesis. Bereshit bara Elohim, God, created the Word, and his spirit was floating on the waters. Now, what that means, I don't know.
What we've discovered through this project is that students' curiosity is not about the historical facts. We want them to know the history. It's important they know the history. But they don't need to know every detail in order to be moved as human beings, to be actors in the world and to be engaged. What this project does, it allows us to close the gap between the student and their lives, which is very divorced from the Holocaust, and the reality of their lives today, so that when they ask questions, the things that are on their mind that are troubling them about racism and hatred and bigotry and the things that they see in their world around them, these Holocaust survivors can answer those questions in a way which is direct and meaningful to them.
This is not an AI in the sense that anything new is getting created. In fact, we promised the Holocaust survivors we would not create anything new. Because as you've probably been seeing from things on the news, you can turn President Obama into anybody you want using artificial intelligence. That's actually the easy end of it. What's difficult is when you've got a limited amount of content and an unlimited amount of people that want to know something from that. And when we do this interview with Pinchas, and we've already said it's only going to be a 5-day interview, and we're going to have school children in North America. We're going to have school children in Europe. We're going to have school children in South Africa. Oh, and you've lived in South Africa and Canada and England and Israel. So the kids from all of those countries are going to want to know something very specific about their country. Oh, and you're also going to have children of survivors, and you might have Holocaust survivors themselves, and you're going to have museum directors and historians. Who are the people that we most want to serve? Because we can only answer so many questions. So what the computer has to do here now is hear what you ask and try and figure out from the words that are coming in, that I'm hearing, what's the best sense I can make of those based on all of those 25 hours of text? Because what happens is everything that Pinchas says gets turned into text, because computer doesn't listen to the video, it looks at text. And what text is made up of is two things. It's made up of content and it's made up of context. So this computer's got to work out is, what is this human being trying to say? Tell me about living in apartheid South Africa.
To live in South Africa in the time of apartheid was extremely difficult for me because I abhorred that whole idea of racism, as you can imagine, being a Jew and having gone through the Holocaust and being discriminated both before the war and during the war as a specific race. And I didn't want to go to South Africa in the first place. So it was very difficult, but circumstances were such that I had absolutely no choice. But the moment I had a choice, I left.
Very often the word empathy, I think, is overused. But what we're trying to do here is actually say, is there a way to close the gap so that there's closing the empathy gap between the individuals who give their story and the young people that are asking the question? It's very easy to be sympathetic about somebody's life and say, oh, I just met this person and what a terrible life they had. This project doesn't do that. What this project does, it puts them in the position where both the student and the Holocaust survivor are empowered. The survivor is empowered to give insights into their lives. The students and the visitors are empowered to ask whatever's on their mind.
Do you ever feel like you want to get revenge?
I'm not a revengeful person. So I wanted justice. And justice is not revenge.
This is not actually a technology project. What this is, it's an opportunity for survivors to tell their story in a very deep and interactive and meaningful personal way, in which we've used technology to enable them to do that. What we're trying to do is say, how in the future can we continue to use all of the wonderful advances that we have at our availability, but in order to do that, to deliver a message that will make the world a better place.
Can you sing me a song?
שיר המעלות לשוב אדוני את שיבת ציון היינו כחולים עוד ימלא שכוי פינה לשוננו רינה עוד יאמרו בגויים
Pirkei Avot, or Ethics of the Fathers, are ancient teachings from the Talmud. However, they may be more relevant today than ever before in this time of great confusion and uncertainty. In the coming months, South Africa's Chief Rabbi Warren Goldstein will explore various statements from Pirkei Avot and give perspective on their modern-day relevance.
What is it that motivates us? This is such an interesting question to contemplate, because if we can understand what truly motivates us, then we can direct our actions to doing great things in the world. And you know, many people say that human motivation is based on self-interest. And of course there's an element of truth in that, because that's how commerce works, that's how society works. There's the sense of, well, what's in it for me? But actually, there's something which is a very powerful teaching from Pirkei Avot, from Ethics of the Fathers, where it says that we should serve God not with the expectation of receiving reward. Now that's an amazing statement, because firstly, one of the basic foundational principles of Judaism is that there is a concept of reward and punishment, that we're held accountable for our deeds, whether good or not, and that is ultimately in the next world. So therefore, there is reward. But why are we called upon to serve God not out of expectation of that reward? Surely that reward becomes an incentive to do good. But actually what this statement of our sages is teaching us is that we need to strive for a higher level of motivation. And what is that? Where else does human motivation come from? And the commentators explain that one dimension of that motivation is love. That we need to serve God and to do mitzvahs and to do good in the world out of love for God and out of love for the people around us. This is a very profound insight, because love is such a powerful human emotion. It is something which can infuse and energize a relationship. And it's so important to think about it in terms of that, because if you think about all the relationships around us, between husbands and wives, brothers and sisters, friends, colleagues, all of these relationships can descend into being transactional, which says, I'm only in the relationship for what you can do for me. I will do this for you if you'll do that for me. Then the relationship becomes transactional. And what our sages are teaching us is that when it comes to our relationship with God, we can't allow that to become transactional. It can't be something that we say, we'll do a mitzvah, we'll do good, but then what's in it for me? It must be done out of love. But then, of course, the question is, that's easier said than done. You know, if it's coming from love, where does love come from? How do you bring about love? This is the question I want to put to you. Can love be nurtured, or is it purely spontaneous? If it's spontaneous, well, then we just have to wait to be overcome by the feelings of love. But can it be nurtured? And the commentators explain that love can be nurtured. You know how it's nurtured? Through one of the most powerful human emotions and thoughts: gratitude. Gratitude is so powerful, because when we think about the good that somebody else has done for us, when we think about the good that God has done for us, and we truly contemplate that, that can fill us with feelings of gratitude. And you know, gratitude is such a wonderful concept, because gratitude is the very opposite of a transactional relationship. In a transaction, you say, what's in it for me? In a transaction is based on expectation. Gratitude is not based on expectation. Gratitude is the very opposite of expectation. Gratitude is saying, I'm grateful to you because I didn't expect you to do this for me. That is what gratitude is all about. And this becomes so important in all of our relationships. In our relationship with God, to think about all the things that God has done for us. He's given us life. The Talmud says that we need to give thanks to God for every breath of life which we take. In our morning prayers, we give thanks to God for every blessing. We take nothing for granted. And when we eat food, when we eat an apple, we thank God for having created the fruit of the tree. Everything that we do and experience, we experience through the lens of gratitude, and so too with all of our relationships, and especially those closest to us. You know, the irony is that those who are closest to us, we kind of expect them to do it. We say, well, a husband should be kind to his wife, and a wife should be kind to her husband, parents to children, children to parents, brothers, sisters, friends. There's this expectation, well, you owe me that. But gratitude is the very opposite of expectation of reward. Gratitude is, I'm so grateful to you for your kindness because I recognize that you are doing things which are kind for me and which give me benefit. And I'm so grateful to you for that. And what our sages explain is that with gratitude comes love. All love begins with gratitude. And our sages also explain that when we give to the people around us, that is actually what brings love. You know, the conventional wisdom says the more that you love a person, the more that you will give to them. But our sages explain that it actually could be the opposite. The more that you give, the more that you love. The more that you pour and invest into another person, the more mitzvahs we do and the more we invest in our relationship with God, the more that we will love him. And so the way to nurture love is through gratitude and through giving. And then everything that we do becomes elevated. Then all of our relationships, starting with our relationship with God, becomes elevated. We then want to do mitzvahs because we are filled with love, with gratitude. We then want to help the people around us and nurture positive, dynamic, beautiful relationships in our families and our friends and our communities because we are filled with gratitude, we are filled with love because we are giving and we are contributing. And that is such a beautiful way to live not with the transactional expectation of what's in it for me, but rather to live life in gratitude, in giving, in love.
Well, that's all we have for this week's episode of Simcha, a celebration of life. As always, we'd love to hear from you, so please send us a Facebook message at Spirit Sister Productions. From me, Jared Epstein, and the Simcha team, remember, stay wise, sanitize.